Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it.
About the signs of mental illness, about having more support structures for people who suffer. Every family suffers from it. Every parish has it. Every society. And we need to dedicate more resources to people who are lonely, who are alone, who are down. So the holidays can be a difficult time.
Hi, Father. So thank you so much for joining us on our podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
So I wanted to tackle the topic of surviving the holidays. Sometimes it can be very difficult because you see all the commercials and everyone looks like, it has to be, Norman Rockwell painting, and it's in reality, a lot of times it's just not.
One of my great favorite Thanksgiving films is actually Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And it's very funny, Steve Martin, John Candy, but in the end, it's revealed that John Candy has lost a loved one. And Steve Martin welcomes him into the home after everything they've gone through. The holidays are sometimes a difficult time for people, especially those who can't go home, who've lost loved ones. And so that's a hard part of the holidays, is navigating sometimes difficult situations. The loss of a loved one is one, but sometimes not every family is intact. In fact, you have lots of blended families, broken families. And how do you interact with your family members and friends? How do you negotiate, if you will, those relationships? How do you not open your mouth and insert foot? What do you say and not say? How do you be prudent in your speech? How do you look? And we've lost a sense of even being civil in our society. So even with family members, sometimes we take them for granted. They're always there. We lose it, and we're not civil and not loving and not kind. And we're none of those things that we ought to be at the holiday time. So how do we hold it all together? The first is, I think, at Thanksgiving time, to think about not what's going wrong or all the problems we have to face, but first of all, to let our hearts be filled with gratitude, and to, rather than respond out of a place of hurt or anger or darkness or loneliness or pain, let's respond from a place of gratitude. Like, what are we truly grateful for? In this country of ours, I'm grateful for freedom. I'm grateful for the gift of life and the air that we breathe, the ability to worship in freedom. All of those things are very important values for which I'm grateful for, just for my country. I've lost both my parents now, but I'm grateful for the parents I had, the brothers I do have, the bonds that we share, the kids I grew up with, friendships. There's so much more to be grateful for. And sometimes we forget that what unites us is far greater than what separates us, whether in the church or in our families or in the world. And so I think having perspective. One priest once told me the 5 keys to life and ministry, the 5 Ps: pace, patience, perseverance, perspective, and prayer. And I think all of those things are important, especially at the holiday times. Pace, right? We're trying to rush here, rush there, prepare everything, wanting everything to be just nice. And we don't pace ourselves, and we get worn down and tired, and then we snap at people. And then we don't even spend time with the people we want to be with because we're too busy doing things. It's like the scriptural story of Martha and Mary. Martha is busy fixing everything to make it just right for the Lord. And Mary's sitting there. And Martha says to her, Lord, tell him to go help me. Tell her to help me. And he said, Martha, Martha, you are anxious about many things. You are in need of only one thing. Your sister Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her. So we need to pace ourselves. Things certainly need to get done, but at the right pace. And we need to see what's really important. The most important thing is not doing, but being. Pace. Patience. I always said, when I was hearing confessions every day as a parish priest, if I had a nickel for every time a spouse or a parent confessed impatience, I'd be a very wealthy priest. But one saint says, patience is that which one is willing to suffer out of love for another. And I think that sometimes we're hardest on the people we love the most. We grow impatient. But what am I willing to suffer for this person who is in front of me? How much more do I love my spouse or my child than this little thing that's irritating me? Am I willing to lose a relationship over something small? Pace, patience, perseverance. In America, we sort of live in a culture of instant gratification. We want things right away. We want them fairly easily. And some would, I once, when I was writing my doctoral dissertation more than 15 years ago, I read an Italian sociologist book, and it was called, in English, it'd be translated like Children of Divorced Spouses, which isn't a great translation. But anyway, what the book showed, the sociologist showed, is that after the Second World War, in a way, we had great success in rebuilding Europe. The American economy was going like gangbusters with manufacturing and so on. We had great successes in the medical field, in coming up with cures for diseases, developing new technologies and things. Unparalleled success. So people got accustomed to it. But then relationships are difficult. And when things didn't come so easily, when there wasn't immediate success, people began to say, I'm getting out of this. They lost a sense of working hard at something in order to succeed, or even enduring for a period of time some degree of suffering and discomfort in order to get to the place where they wanted to be. In other words, we have to really be committed and have this real sense of persevering to the end. And that's true in relationships and families, but it's also true in life and in my business, persevering for eternal life, persevering at the moment of our death. Pace, patience, perseverance, perspective. Don't sweat the small stuff. And I think that's one of the things we no longer have a great sense of. Big picture stuff. Are these relationships more important than what I got for Christmas? Like, I mean, sometimes I remember kids throwing great fits over they didn't get the right color iPhone that they wanted. Right. Meanwhile, my family in India, they were happy they had food to eat at Christmas time. And you see such great poverty around the world. Again, this should inspire in us gratitude. Perspective also there's a phrase, I cried and cried because I had no shoes till I met a man who had no feet.
Yeah.
And this also should remind us of the need to be grateful. Some people at Christmas time and the holidays have no one in their life. We have a lot of material possessions. We're very much connected by technology, but there is what Mother Teresa of Calcutta used to call a great poverty of loneliness.
Father, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of different families that have abusive dynamics, whether it's verbal or physical, and oftentimes people can be triggered by different family members. How does someone deal with that when you're trying so hard? Because if you go to see some of these folks, you know what I mean? It's more than just the present,
You have to have in my mind, you have to have a concrete plan. Like this is a kind of slightly different situation, but I was doing spiritual direction for a guy, and he was a lawyer in Cincinnati, and he and his wife, they have a beautiful family. I think now they have 6 kids, but he was finding that when he came home, he immediately got into it with his wife, because as soon as he got home from work, his wife homeschooled their children. She was with the kids all day. The kids were all over him, and she was worn down from the day trying to prepare the evening meal. And, they'd get into arguments all the time. And finally I said to him, on your way home from work, don't have the radio on. Don't let it talk radio get you all riled up. And then when you get home, don't go in right away. Sit in your car for a minute and think about how you want the conversation to go. In other words, sometimes you watch football and like the first 10 offensive plays are sometimes scripted. What do you want the script to be? How do you want the conversation to go? How do you not want it to go? Where do you not want to go? So you can have a civil and a controlled conversation without being triggered. In that sense, there are some people who you say hello to, right? You're kind, you're polite, but you don't have to be their friend. And then so part of the wisdom of this is knowing when to walk away. And sometimes it's like having, in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you could phone a friend. Having somebody else with you who can also keep you honest, who can hold you accountable, don't say that, or who can be the person who rescues you from a situation. When they hear this, okay, it's time for us to go. Something else has come up. We've got to go. That's one way of negotiating. But I think having concrete steps and a concrete plan when you're going into conversations or situations is very important. Many times people don't think through how they want the conversation to go, or what will be their response if such and such person does this or says that. I'm going to walk away. Sometimes it's better to walk away from those situations. And at the holidays, I'm not saying you be dishonest, but many things come up and you have a lot of things on your calendar. So sometimes you know how to stop in, make a short visit, and move on. And then you visit it. It's not like you've blown the person off. You keep the relationship going till they're in a better place or till you're in a better place. Not everything has to be perfect right away, and you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So you don't throw the good out because it's not perfect. Because other people, and you don't know what all their issues are. So you greet them, you meet them where they're at, you try to love them with all their strengths and all their weaknesses, the way you hope they would love you with all your strengths and all your weaknesses. But I think the last of those 5 P's was, for me, prayer. Like to really say, even a short prayer, God grant me patience. God, I'm going in there, help me to say the right thing, or to know, help me to guard my tongue. Set, O Lord, a guard over my mouth, keep watch at the gates of my lips, from Psalm 141. Or St. Paul says, say only the good things men need to hear, words that will truly help them. I think part of our problem in society today is we're filled with negativity. I mean, there's so much negativity on the radio, on the television, through the internet and social media. We need more positive people, especially at the holidays. There's many things that we need to celebrate. Family, friends. You know, in India, Diwali has begun. Soon Hanukkah will be upon us, and then Christmas, even after Thanksgiving. So there are all those sorts of things that we have to celebrate. And then as the new year draws to a close, to count the blessings of the year and make resolutions about how we ourselves can be better, more positive, more virtuous each and every day.
What is the blue mass?
So in the Catholic Church, we have the red mass, the white mass, and the blue mass. The red mass is the oldest of them, and that is to open the judicial year. Red is the color of the Holy Spirit, so it's praying for the Holy Spirit for wisdom, for prudence, guidance on the judges, and so on and so forth. And usually that's held in early October. The white mass is held, it's because doctors wear long white coats, and it's for Catholic doctors and medical professionals, established by the Catholic Medical Association. And that's usually associated with October 18th and the feast day of St. Luke, who is not only a gospel writer, but a physician. And then the blue mass is something relatively new. It's usually pretty close to September 11th, and it's for policemen, firefighters, and first responders. And then in some dioceses like Columbus, we do the gold mass, which I had last Friday, close to the feast of St. Cecilia, which is today, November 22nd. And it's for church musicians. St. Cecilia is the patroness of musicians.
So when you think of the holidays, being from another country, what is your, what's your reminiscence? What's your memories of something like that?
Well, I mean, so my favorite Christmas, I mean, I remember how Christmas in 1975 and stuff in India was very simple. Even 1983, we maybe got one gift. There was a tiny, scrawny tree. I remember thinking, oh, Santa in India has brown skin. Santa in the United States has white skin. I wonder why Santa has a white beard one year and a black beard another year. You know, and why is Santa in India so much skinnier than the Santa in America? So I have memories like that. I remember the food we ate in India, and then my mother would make turkey at Thanksgiving and Christmas, so I remember that in the States. But my favorite Christmas actually was one year. It was in between medical school and entering the seminary. I spent a year of discernment in Rome at a house, and Christmas Eve, I went to work with Mother Teresa sisters at San Gregorio, where St. Gregory the Great had been a monk, on the Chalian Hill, not far from the Colosseum. And we work with the sisters to feed the elderly poor and to bathe the elderly poor and to give them a little nice meal on Christmas Eve. And then we brought them to Mass and put them to bed and, you know, wished them for Christmas. And then the sisters, though, they packed us up with backpacks with sandwiches and water and Coca-Cola. And we went out into the streets of Rome. and we found homeless people living under the shelter of the churches and alleyways, and we fed them and talked to them. So because Christmas is for them too. And so I remember doing this, and then we all met back at St. Peter's Square, and Pope John Paul II was coming out for a midnight mass, and the rector of our house said, "No, we have to go home because we have to help the sisters tomorrow. Tomorrow is not for us; it's for them." And so you really get a sense of what Christmas is about, that Jesus himself was born in poverty, and the simplicity and the beauty in that simplicity of Christmas. In my family, also, in addition to those traditions, every year we made a nativity set. We had our crib set, but then we did something creative. My dad was very creative. So one year he had a huge model of the lunar module because we were still landing on the moon. Then we put the nativity set inside of it. One year we made a three-dimensional Bible, and we had written in one side in Latin, in principio erat verbum. In the beginning was the word, and on the other, and then we inserted our nativity scene into it. One year we made a whole city of Bethlehem. One year my brothers and I made a stained glass window. So we always had this great tradition of the Christmas creche. Here at the Diocese of Columbus, there's a famous Columbus nativity scene that an insurance company used to display in the city for the last 75 years or so, but they weren't going to do it this year, but they gave it to us. So it's out in front of St. Joseph Cathedral right now. And I'll do the blessing. We'll have Vespers at St. Joseph Cathedral on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. I'll bless it, and then it'll stay up through Epiphany, through January 6th. So we're looking forward to it. We're hoping a lot of people come and gaze upon the scene, and it's going to be a great place for families to come and contemplate something spiritual and be together as families.
So if somebody comes to this and they're not Catholic or not very religious, I think there's always a story or something to be learned from seeing something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, if you like, for example, I had family members who were Hindus, yet they still admired the nativity scene and the simplicity and the beauty of it. In India, in Jaipur, the Raj was very fascinated by the fact that a virgin could be with child, that a family journeys together. So some people aren't religious, but they know Christmas, or at least the Christmas story, and it awakens in something in themselves, a childlike innocence. It recalls them to a better time, a simpler time in their life. And then they say, well, maybe I might not go to church every Sunday, but I can recognize that God became a child. Or maybe I see the innocence in these other children who have come to see this, and I say, I need to change my life. Or I see other families together, and I think about, maybe I need to reach out to someone from whom I'm disconnected and need to be reconciled. So there are a lot of things in a lot of different ways that awaken people in their faith. I remember I had a guy's wedding. I went to college with him. He was Catholic. His wife was Lutheran. They had 4 children, but he just got so busy one year going to Christmas parties and stuff, he didn't even go to church on Christmas. And I talked to him a little bit about it. And at that stage in their life, they had four boys in 5 years, and they were extremely busy. Now he's in a different place in his life. His boys are growing up, they're doing great things, but they go to church, and he's very grateful. So just like the Holy Family, now they're the perfect family as they journey. Our families are less than perfect, but we want them to be more holy, more perfect. And so we journey with people, we walk with people. And so maybe that's also part of the Advent and Christmas season and the holiday season is this kind of journey. And each person has a different journey, but until we take our last breath, our journey's not over. And even after that, in Christian faith, we also believe in eternal life. So it's something to see, and it's a time to be together, and it's an edifying sort of experience. People today, they spend all the kinds of time on their phone, watching videos, doing violent things, doing drugs, all these sorts of things. Why not just go and look at the beauty of creation and the beauty of the nativity scene and allow, like all art and beauty can change us. Dostoevsky says, beauty will save the world. And beauty and truth and goodness, the Greeks would say, go hand in hand in hand. And I think the beauty of the nativity scene also then brings out in us the goodness and leads us to an encounter with the truth. And so that's what we hope people will come and see.
I think it's going to be wonderful. It's really nice. And so then if somebody says, hey, I tried to reconcile with family, or they don't have family anymore, everyone's passed away, what does someone in that situation do? Because it can be very hard when you don't have family anymore.
It's true. I mean, it is hard. Like last year was the first Christmas without my mother. It is hard, but I'd say come to church, right? Because there's always a place for you. You know, we as Catholics, we think of the church as the family of God, but I think about it because I live a celibate life, right? But I have thousands and hundreds of thousands of children, if you will, and brothers and sisters. So in that sense, and I have them from all over the world, right? You think you're alone, but you're not. I mean, there were all those elderly people, and Mother Teresa's sisters cared for them, so they didn't have to be alone. The planes, back to planes, trains, and automobiles, right? There is a place for you. And I think, and so we, of course, all need to be more welcoming, but to realize you're never alone. I think right now, a lot of people in our society struggle with mental illness. The bishops, we were all gathered in Baltimore last week, and Bishop Barron and Archbishop Gutsiak, who's a Ukrainian Archbishop of Philadelphia, spoke to all the bishops about mental health awareness and about the need to be more intentional about looking out for others, about the signs of mental illness, about having more support structures for people who suffer. Every family suffers from it. Every parish has it. Every society. And we need to dedicate more resources to people who are lonely, who are alone, who are down. So the holidays can be a difficult time, but that's what I would remind people. There is someone out there for you who loves you. And sometimes you can see him and sometimes you can't. But the invisible God made himself known in the face of a child for you. And I think this is what the people, this is why St. Alphonsus Liguori used to say, if God is lost, all is lost. And I think this is why we need also faith in our life and to help us to understand that God is always there for us. The word Emmanuel means God is with us. And so that's part of the equation. And the other thing is from the point of view of family members. Whom do I really need to be more present to who's struggling, who I know is struggling, and be intentional about calling them, about making an effort to see them at the holidays, even if it's for coffee for 5 minutes, a phone call. Don't just text them. Go see them. Go hold their hand. You have someone who's elderly and in a nursing home, go see them. You have someone who is in a mental institution or a home, go visit them. Write them a letter. Last Christmas, I went up to the women's correctional up in Marysville, but I also went to the men's prison down in Chillicothe. And there's a Catholic chapel in the men's prison in Chillicothe. So I had one mass for the general population. And I had one mass for those on death row. And in my mind, I was thinking, will this be their last Christmas? Thanks be to God, there haven't been any executions in the state of Ohio. But one guy came up to me and said, Bishop, I hear you're from Cincinnati. And I said, yeah. He said, I'm from Cincinnati too. And I said, oh, what part of Cincinnati are you from? He said, oh, Camp Washington. I said, oh, that's funny. I was the pastor of the Italian church in Cincinnati in Camp Washington, Sacred Heart. And he said, that was my parish. And I said, what's your name? And he told me his name. And I said, was your mother Pat? And he said, yeah, that was my mom. And Pat, his mother, was very devout. The rest of his relatives weren't so devout, but the one thing that his family would do was they would assemble the nativity scene every year in the church on Christmas. They didn't come like regularly to mass, but they did that for the church. And his mother, Pat, would always say, pray for my son, he's in jail. Well, she didn't tell me why he was in jail, or that he was on death row. But I thought to myself, this man was somebody's child. And his mother really did love him, even though he had done something terrible. And so it's a very sort of moving experience. Even those folks need our love. And Christmas is for them too. And Thanksgiving is for them too. And so every person has a role to play. When I was a child, we watched some of those claymation stories, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. In fact, here at my office, I have a bobblehead of Bumble because I was clumsy as a child, but the abominable snowman. The Year Without a Santa Claus. You know, there's the Island of Misfit Toys, or all these sorts of things. But one of my favorite ones was called Nestor the Long-Eared Christmas Donkey. And it's about a donkey. Everybody makes fun of him because he has long ears. He trips over his ears. He's sort of made to do hard work. And then he and his mother escape. But then there's a huge snowstorm, and his mother covers over him in order to save his life. But then he's on his own. And so sometimes people feel like I'm on my own, but the angels come to greet him. But then he gets captured, and they're going to sell him, and nobody wants to buy him. But then there's a poor couple that's about to have a child, and they buy him on the cheap because they're poor, and it turns out to be Mary and Joseph. And so there's a happy ending. I think sometimes we feel like that donkey. People make fun of us. Sometimes we're alone. We feel like we have no hope, but there's always hope. And I think for people who struggle at the holidays because of loneliness, because of mental illness, there is hope. And that's, I think, society as a whole has to be more aware. Perhaps a great challenge to us is in America is that we're so individualistic. We pride ourselves on our individual liberties and freedoms, but we need to think about all those around us. Whether it's Nestor the Long-Eared Christmas Donkey or that experience I described in Rome, we have to think globally and act locally, and with respect to other people in our midst, so that holidays can truly be filled with joy.
Oh, I have my last question. So, a lot of times there's this big ramp up for Christmas and all this, excitement, and then it's over, and then the winter blues kick in, and the next beginning of the year, and then it becomes, kind of depressing. And so any tips on overcoming that?
Well, first of all, yeah, because I think one of the things is Christmas stuff goes up after Halloween, but Christmas doesn't begin until Christmas Day. So in our Catholic tradition, we have a whole liturgical season of Christmas that follows. So Advent is a time of preparing, and people, I think, anticipate Christmas too much, and they get too busy too soon rather than pacing themselves. Then Christmas comes, even we say 12 days of Christmas, from Christmas to Epiphany. Even that can be a time of carrying on the celebration. It used to be that the Christmas season would actually last till February 2nd, 40 days after the birth of Jesus, when Mary and Joseph brought the child Jesus up to the temple. And that's when we bless the candles in the church. But sometimes people do suffer from seasonal affective disorder and so on. I think part of it is, one, to celebrate Christmas as it truly is. The day after Christmas, Boxing Day, don't take your tree out there to the curb as well. Don't take down your Christmas decorations. Leave them up for a while. Leave them up for a while. People get sick of it because they put them up so early, but leave it up for a while to remember the season of joy, the season of light, the season of peace. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I always say, try to find little oases. So during Lent, I usually give up meat. And sometimes when I don't eat meat and I'm fasting pretty heavily, I get crabby with people. I get worn down. The days are dark. But there's certain days that I look forward to, St. Patrick's Day or St. Joseph's Day, or the Feast of the Annunciation on March 25th, 9 months before Christmas. I really look forward to those because they're not days of penance and fasting. The days of true celebration. Well, people go overboard with Valentine's Day, right? But this year, I think Valentine's Day actually coincides with Ash Wednesday.
Oh.
So people ought to think about, what is it that I'm really celebrating? And what brings me joy and satisfaction in my life? Sometimes we think it's food or drink, and it's not. I knew a guy, he loved television. He had like 7 kids, and then when he'd get back from work, he'd go down into his man cave. This was 20 years ago, and he had his guns on the wall, his American flag, his picture of the president, and a huge big screen TV. And he'd sit in his chair with his 64-ouncer and watch television. And he says, Father, I love television. I love television. He said, but television never loves me back. My wife, my kids, they love me back. And so I think having kind of a few close friendships where you can get together with people for coffee or a meal, having a few occasions to celebrate. Maybe it's a birthday or something good happened at work. To use these little points to get from one point to another. I think back to the events of Charlottesville 4 or 5 years ago, and I encounter prejudice in my life, but I'm also well educated. I'm a bishop in the Catholic Church. I have a doctoral degree. I come from a good family. And every time I would encounter racial prejudice, I'd kind of have this kind of warm feeling come over me. I'd be in between embarrassment and anger, but I could hold it together. But then I thought about, some people have to face this every day, and life's a lot harder for them. And again, it gave me a little bit of perspective. So for some people, every day it's hard, especially when they suffer from mental illness, to get out of bed. I guess one thing would be to make concrete steps, to have modest plans. There's a phrase, Rome wasn't built in a day. What can I do today? Once a counselor once described it to me. I helped a victim of sexual abuse once come forward, and she was making a lot of progress. But he described this kind of like a wardrobe. And in the wardrobe, you've got blouses and skirts, and overcoats and things that you want to wear, purses, and shoes. And he would say to her, the counselor would say, now today, you get to open the wardrobe and you take out what you want to do today, what you want to wear today. And so each day, there's those things which we must do and those things which we want to do, but we have a degree of freedom and control. So what can I do today concretely? What would I like to do today? And what am I capable of doing today? If our goals are unrealistic, we'll be frustrated. But if we have modest goals and we can then build up some confidence, then we can get things going. And during those difficult months, I think, have modest goals, have concrete ones, have little oases and points for celebration. Get things on the calendar now where you're going to get together with people after Christmas. When you're going to meet people Thanksgiving, Christmas, the holidays, let's do a follow-up in January or February when people sometimes are alone. Let's continue to live the joy of the holidays. That's what I would recommend to people.
Thank you so much. Those are all great tips. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.